I'm Alistair Douglas. I'm an archaeologist with Pre-Construct Archaeology, and I'm talking today about the archaeology of Bermondsey Abbey from the Saxon period through to the 16th century and the dissolution. So let's begin. Here I've put up on the screen a plan of the area showing the archaeological interventions from Grimes in 1959, and then he excavated again in 1962 and 1963. There he is in the green up in the northeast. The site itself were 800 metres south of the Thames. This is Tower Bridge Road, obviously leading to Tower Bridge. Grimes unearths part of the north wall of the Abbey Church and part of the north transept. Large-scale excavations started again in the 1980s with the Department of Greater London Archaeology. And it was after those excavations that the whole area was scheduled as an ancient monument, which you can see in the red. And Mola carried on with large-scale excavations in the 1990s, and they were unearthing the eastern range of the Abbey and part of the south range. From 1998 onwards, Pre-Construct Archaeology got involved, so we were in there from 1998 to 2008. These excavations are in blue. These excavations were in advance of the development of Bermondsey Square, but we also looked at a plot of land that we call the Island here, which was to north of the White Bear Public House here. We looked at an area to the north of the scheduled ancient monument in Stephen Street, and we also re-excavated part of the Mola Site A right here on the eastern side. Bermondsey, the name gives a hint to its early Saxon origins. There is in the post-Roman period of the 5th century, scattered Saxon settlements began to be settled from the Thames estuary right up to Oxford, showing the importance of the Thames as a corridor into the country, the communication route. And Bermondsey sits in nicely as one of those early 5th century settlements. And sure enough, we did unearth some evidence for the early Saxon settlements, including some of these potsherds here that I put up on the screen. We had a few pits and a few bits of remnants of field systems. Now, the first suggestion that there is a minster, a Saxon minster at Bermondsey in the Middle Saxon period, is the reference in the Liber Niger of Peterborough, that's the Black Book, where Pope Constantine addresses Hedda as Abbot of Bermondsey, and that is the suggestion that there is a Saxon minster. It seems likely that Bermondsey may have been part of a Middle Anglian federation with a head house at Peterborough and satellites at Brendon on the Hill, Woking and perhaps Hoo and Brixworth. However, until actually the PCA excavations, there was no evidence, no archaeological evidence whatsoever for this minster. However, along the northern frontage, we started to pick up fragments of masonry foundations which were early. They were in the lowest part of our sequence in masonry remains, and here's an example here. East-west running foundation. It's a layer of chalk, roughly chalk blocks here, with some packed gravel on top. Very fragmentary, but when we look at the plan here, we seem to have a series, east-west linear series of perhaps separate buildings. We know that Saxon minsters weren't usually a single large church, but it is a pattern of small churches on an east-west alignment is something that does fit a Saxon minster. And I put showing a burial ground to the south here, and I'll come more onto that later. But that is the archaeological my evidence for that this may have been the actual minster, part of the minster complex. To support the idea of this Saxon minster, there are a few intriguing finds, and 7 Saxon skyat coins have been found at Bermondsey Square, at Stephen Street, and from the earlier Bermondsey Abbey excavations. The skyat coin is a silver coin dating to the Middle Saxon period, so there's clearly somebody about. Here is a Saxon hook tag. These finds are These Saxon hook tags are not uncommon on Saxon minster sites. They've been found before. It's a clothing fastening, perhaps for a cloak or something, or possibly a purse. And here, I think, is a very important find. This is a Saxon ceramic mould, circular, and what this is a mould for a circular mount. It would have looked like this. Obviously, this isn't what we found. This is an example. And this circular mount, this kind of circular mount, would have been put on this kind of object. And this is a reliquary box. This is just the kind of object that would have been made at a minster site. So really that ceramic mould is extremely important. Another very interesting find is this stone lamp. Unfortunately, this was from a plus, so it's not from a context. It's early. It's made of basalt. The basalt itself is from either from northeast Scotland or from Norway, and it may be something that was used in the minster itself. Okay, so if I go back to that possible graveyard, we didn't actually find any inhumations dating to the Middle Saxon period. Well, what we did find was in the 11th century quarry pits on Stephen Street, we found a considerable quantity of charnel, representing a minimum of 185 individuals. These remains have been carbon dated to between 690 and 882. And what was extraordinary about them was the sheer quantity of blunt trauma force to some of these skeletons. Example of the skulls here. I have another one here, a whole skull, and you can see the blunt blow to the top of the head. So this population was certainly subject to a lot of violence. And it just reminds me of the header stone in Peterborough Cathedral, dated to about 870, that shows the carved figures of 12 monks and is supposed to represent those killed in Danish raids, in which some 84 monks, including the abbot header, were dispatched. It may well be, what I'm suggesting therefore is that the minster, because it disappears, it is not there in the late Saxon period, it may have fallen to Viking or Danish depredation in the 8th or early 9th century. Well, in the 9th century probably. We did find some Saxon inhumations, very late Saxon. Here's an example of a woman in her 50s buried in the prone position, which is a bit of an unusual but not unknown in late Saxon cemeteries. There are various theories about this. One, it may be that the person was seen to be deviant in some way. Another one, that perhaps it's penitence. Of course, it could just be that somebody's got it the wrong way round. And here is an apsidal foundation on the island site. It's curving. It's in this technique of chalk packed, in this case dirt, chalk packed dirt like the layers of a cake. It appears to date to the late Saxon period, probably 10th century. Here's a wider view of it on the island. You can see on the right these large foundations here. They use mortar again and chalk, but a lot of mortar in it. These are later medieval foundations of the south transept. What I'm interested in showing you at the moment is this curving foundation here. This is just a modern concrete intrusion. And if we look at my plan now, you can see what I think we may have the remains of a church, late Saxon church, some graves to the east. And when we put on the molar data, you can see some 10th century boundary ditches to the east. So in the late Saxon period, the settlement has emerged as a royal manor. As I widen the excavations out on Bermondsey Square, starting in the northeast corner, I started to pick up this wall here, south wall to a church. That is 11th century. Is a Romanesque church with these pilasters protruding here, these thin pilasters, one here, and it's very interesting. Here, of course, there are some modern in walls that have chopped into it, and as we expand it more, here it is revealed. This is the wall that I'm talking about, with plaster here, plaster there, and this is the end of that build. That's the end and the entrance to the church. So this is a south wall running east-west of a church. The inside of it would have been to the north, and that's its west end. The Domesday Book says there is a new and beautiful church, and this must be a contender for it, I would argue. It's faced with carn stone in small ashlar blocks. Okay, in 1089, William Rufus gives this land to the monks from Chartres-sur-Loire, Cluniac Priory, and they established the Priory of St Saviour at Bermondsey. The first Cluniac Priory is established in Lewes in around the 1070s, so this one's a little bit later, a decade later or so. And I think they used that pre-Norman church, which is already existing, and that becomes a priory church, while they start to construct their monastery. You can see what I think is the cloister garth, or proto-cloister garth, denoted by fragments of ditches here. The charnel pits that you see here appear to be removing graves, and it may be this is where the charnel, that middle Saxon charnel, appearing on Stephen Street. And so what they may be actually doing is ethnically cleansing the area of the cloister garth of the dead. There will be no burials inside the garth area throughout the medieval period. Now, when we put this on with the molar evidence, you can see this nice boundary ditch here, and then also note this chapel here. So this is I said 11th century, and so they also have a contender for the new and beautiful church. So there you go, you take your pick with that one. But there's certainly two churches standing at a roughly the same period. And they probably are contemporary. Now the Cluniac order is reaches its height of popularity, if you like, in the 11th and 12th centuries. It's very influential. It has a lot of political power. It seems to be taken up by the kings and princes across Europe, and its position here opposite the Tower of London, I think, is probably quite significant. It's in quite a how can I put it? A location that would have been very obvious as if you approached London up the river. I don't think that is a coincidence. And there's St Saviour's Dock, which is a dock built by the monks, and of course they would have transported their building material and their cairn stone via this dock probably. As we expanded the area further, you can see the church, this pre-monastic church was extended, and completion of it probably wasn't actually completed. This is the Priory church, and until sometime in the maybe in the 1180s or even 1200. There is a dedication to the church in 1206, and what they've done is they've extended the church to the west, and they've added on this massive flanking tower. So there will have been another flanking tower to the north outside our area of excavation, and you have this massive flanking tower that you see them working on here. Please note that this is a construction cut for that tower, and it is the only location where the construction cut is wider than the foundations, and we'll see the significance of that in the next slide. And it's also truncating this earlier, possibly Middle Saxon foundation here. The other structures that you see to the south of the wall alignment are later medieval, or up here the Tudor. Okay. And here's a closer look at those foundations to the tower. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see a face staring back at you. This grotesque skull is in the foundations there. And we look again, and there's a close-up of it. You can see the tongue, the teeth. It seems to have had a snout once that has been sheared off. There does seem to be some damage to the eyes. And I would suggest that this is quite a deliberate placement. For what purpose, I'm not sure. But intriguingly, there were two human skulls also put inside the tower. On the island site, going back there, these are the foundations to the south transept, with possibly a cell structure off to the east. Massive foundations, still built in layers of chalk, but using mortar to bind them together. Okay. Along the North Range, there were several cis tombs. It was clearly a popular place to be buried because some of these tombs intercut one another. There must be some degree of status, I think, to be in these tombs. I've got nice in these tombs, with their nice head niches. They start to come into southern Britain from the 11th century onwards. And if we look at my plan of the abbey, or the priory, sorry, from that period, 1150 to 1200, and I've put it with the molar excavations and with Grimes's excavations, this is what you get. The Priory Church, about 98 metres east-west, with its flanking towers, north and south transept. And we have a west range, but Prior's Lodge, guest range, and the molar site with its infirmary, its refectory, the dormitory, the latrine block, and a chapel, presumably for the infirmary as well. So that is the Priory, the Priory in its completed form. And just to show you with other Cluniac churches, there you go. Here's Lewis, slightly bigger, obviously not as big as Cluny 3, but certainly on a par with Charite sur Loire, and you can see the influence of these Cluniac design churches in the Bermondsey layout. Now, in the 14th century, we get a massive rebuilding, which is shown here with these huge buttresses, suggesting that the whole height of a church had been increased. And you can clearly see that it's completely different to these earlier foundations here that go with the early ashlar stonework here. And in the island site, you're looking at the northeast corner of the cloisters. They also have been rebuilt in this 14th century. And there's a nice relieving arch for the foundations that cross soft ground. It's a technique that you start to see coming in from the 13th century onwards in ecclesiastical architecture. Rebuilding of the Prior's Lodge in the 14th century. The Prior now is living in his own apartment. He's separated now from his monks, probably living quite well, I would have thought. A massive rebuilding of the western range. This is the solarium, where they keep all the stores of food and wine and so on. That's what these foundations represent. And here we've got a tomb that was empty, but was quite a substantial tomb built against the south wall. And this is a well house, also built against the south wall of a church. They would have needed water in the cloisters. It's where they did their washing, both of their clothes, their bedding. It's also where they shaved their tonsures. And here is a plan, 1350 to about 1538, with everything put together, what I call a great church. And you can see it actually, surprisingly, seems to work quite well. What's important is the cloister has been rebuilt, and it's now changed its shape. It's gone to a rectangular, and it's extended. Normally, the cloister sits in the elbow of the transept, and you can see here it's larger than that. Okay, this is what may be the scriptorium, and you've got the west range there, and we've also put on Grimes's work as well, so it all fits quite nicely. That here's a massive amount of work stone, not surprisingly, was collected. Most of it was reused in later contexts, right up until the 19th century actually. And here we can see some examples of stone reused in wall. Here's a nice example of a figurative carving, a female head, probably used as a corbel, maybe over a doorway or a window. There is some damage to the mouth that might be deliberate when it was perhaps taken down at the time of a dissolution. It was reused actually in the steps of Pope's mansion in the 16th century. Pope was the man that got the land after the dissolution. And the work stone sorted by decade, which nicely fits my phasing quite well, I think. You can see here 1100, 1140 to 1180 building campaign going on there. 1200 where they may have completed the church, the conventual church. The rebuilding of 1340 to 1350. And then a little bit of rebuilding in the later period. Something interesting for you. We found some bones from a sparrowhawk and a gyrfalcon. Now, sparrowhawks would have been flown by priests, but a gyrfalcon is the top bird, if you like, or one of the top birds in the falconry hierarchy. Would have only been flown by kings or princes. It's a bird that comes from Greenland and northern Norway. So there's an interesting find. Perhaps more typical of a monastery is a bone stylus and an oyster shell palette for mixing paint. And here's some graffiti on a bit of cairnstone showing a knight, great helm, probably 14th century, the shield and a sword. Knights, of course, would have been quite frequent visitors, I think, to the monastery, passing through on the way to the continent or to Canterbury. And of course, Bermondsey was a pilgrimage centre in itself. But when we enhance the graffiti, you can see there's other things going on as well. You've got these eyes that stare back at you that may have some significance, maybe to ward off evil. There's some other graffiti down here, not quite sure what's going on, but there you go. And here is this. Isn't this amazing? Is this medieval music? Is that what we're looking at? Hasn't been completely confirmed, but extremely exciting if it was. And this is my reconstruction of Bermondsey Abbey at the time of the conventual church around about 1200, showing the flanking towers and the gatehouse into the inner precinct. And I think we're about there. So thank you all very much. I hope you enjoyed that. Bye bye.